Hi, this is Colin with Fifth World Collective. I wanted to make a short video, hopefully short, on some basics, tips and tricks, so forth, to get you started with vector design for laser cutter, CNC router, CNC plasma, water jet, essentially any CNC tool that cuts objects out of flat sheet material. CorelDraw is what I use. I've tried most others, and I just love the workflow and the efficiency of CorelDraw for this particular application. Now, I am 100% self-taught, so I'm not always convinced I'm doing things the best or the right or like the traditional way, but it works for me. I've gotten pretty fast with it. I do a lot of laser cutting and CNC router work. So I just wanted to pass on some of the things that I've learned. When you open Corel, you'll get something like this, and you're going to want to click, new file, new, or this little button here, new file, and then you'll have just a blank page here. So this is what's called your page or your artboard. Some laser systems use this as kind of like the virtual bed, or working table for your machine, and you can set its dimensions up here to reflect the machine that you're actually working with. My system does not use this as like it'll use it as a print driver, so you'll click print and it'll send it over to the laser software. Mine doesn't do that, so I ignore the existence of this thing entirely. Alright, so I'm gonna try to use kind of like an overview of these tools here on the left, and the options that you're going to have up here. I'll try not to skip around too much, but they all kind of work together, so we'll see how it goes. I'm going to draw a couple objects just to get us started, and we'll go over like each object individually, but for now I just want a couple objects out there. Alright, so first and foremost is the pick tool. Very, very important. You will be using this thing all the time. This is how you select or deselect and manipulate objects. I can take the square and I can draw a circle or a square around it and select it that way, or I can select it by clicking on it. Now we'll note these little black squares in the corner and centers of it. Those allow us to scale and skew it to whatever size we want. Now we also note that up here are the dimensions of the object we have selected. So when I'm trying to draw a square and I want it to be 10 inches by 20 inches long, I'm not going to use this ruler, I'm not going to use any of these dimension tools. I'm just going to draw a square of any size, and then I'm going to enter 10, I forgot what I said, but 10 by 20 inches, and then I know that the square is the right size for me. This is the lock ratio button, so if I have this selected and I make this 15 inches, it's gonna take care of this dimension accordingly to keep it in the ratio with itself, in proportion with itself. Next on the pick tool options are the ability to rotate. So if I have it selected and then I click it again, it changes and it gives me these handles that I can use to rotate it. I can also grab it by any part of it and rotate it, and I can also grab this little target in the center and move my axis of rotation to wherever I might like. If you know that you want to move an object or rotate it by a particular degree, you can just select it, and up here you can enter in whatever degree your heart desires, and that's a more accurate way of doing it rather than eyeballing it. So yeah. Alright, the one other thing that the pick tool will do is it doesn't work for closed curves like this square, but for lines. If you triple click it rapidly, it gives you the pick tool, or the shape tool, and that is found here on your tool selection menu, and another very important tool. So this is kind of how I edit nodes. We'll go over nodes in just a moment. But yeah, it gives you these arrows that you can take and skew and drag it along. You can add a new node, and It's very good for editing lines, and it also works quite well for editing curves. So if I click the little arrow on a curve, it's going to give me these handles here with which I can, I can skew the curvature of the line that I have drawn. Excuse me, somebody's messaging me on Facebook. I'll check that later. Okay, yeah, so nodes. While we're talking about nodes, that's very important. Yeah, nodes are going to be, sorry, the Facebook is distracting me. Nodes are essential, and snap to in the top menu up here. Objects will make nodes snap to each other. I recommend to basically always have that on. You may find reason to not want it on occasionally, but for the most part you're going to want that on. And that means that when you have two objects and you want them to be perfectly lined up with each other, you grab it, and when it gets close enough, it like says node real small up there. And yeah, you can just snap two objects right together that way. Now that's another really handy thing. So yeah, this is like the crop little tool menu, and there is a hidden tool in here that I find very useful. I use constantly, called the virtual segment delete. And if we click that, what that allows us to do is we, kind of draw through lines that we want to remove until we get to the next node or vector that it intersects. Very handy. Now, this is the zoom tool, and basically you're going to need to have a mouse with the little wheel on it, because that is just how you navigate around. It is how you zoom out and zoom in. And so yeah, if you have I would never even contemplate trying to design on here without my zoom attached to the wheel on my mouse. So strongly recommend that. If you don't have a mouse with a wheel and you want to do vector design in CorelDraw, go buy a mouse with a wheel. Alright, so let's go to the lines. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm going to go through the basic ones. 2-point line and 3-point curve are probably enough to get you started. 2-point line, very simple. You just click, hold down the mouse button until you have the line where you want it, and let go, and you have a line. Now, if we want to draw a straight line, straight meaning, kind of like, I don't know, like horizontal or vertical here, and we hold control, it will force it into staying flat. I kind of just think of this as 0 degrees when I design. And then if you move the mouse up, it'll snap it in increments of 15 degrees. So 15, 30, 45, 60, 90. I skipped one there, but we get the point. So yeah, very important. Speaking of holding control while you draw things, if I have a square and I'm drawing and I want it to be perfectly proportionate and I hold control, it will force it to stay proportionate. So yeah, important. Alright, and the 3-point curve. So we start just like we would a regular line, and then when we let go, we're not done. We can change it. Holding control, once again, will keep it symmetrical and proportionate. And then, you can grab your pick tool if you like and edit the curves later. But those are kind of the important lines for now. As you get more advanced, you might find uses for the Bezier or other objects or other tools that are found in that menu. But for now, that should do ya. Yeah, square. Like I said, if you hold control, it makes it a perfect square. There is also the oh, I'm sorry. I guess it's called a rectangle. The 3-point rectangle, also pretty handy. That means I click and I draw it, and it looks like a line. And then I can snap it to this node, and then when I let go, it's does this number here. So it's pretty cool. You can start a rectangle and make it tilted at whatever degree you like, or I like that one. Here is the ellipse tool, or I think of it as the circle tool. Same deal with the 3-point. I'm not going to beat that to death. But yeah, hold control, it'll stay perfect. Don't hold control, it'll be an oval. Here's the polygon tool. We take that and we draw a thing with it. And then up here we have how many sides do we want it to have. Three sides is a triangle, you know, square, pentagon, hexagon, heptagon, octagon. I don't know what a 9 is called, but anyway, yeah, that's how you do that. The text tool, pretty straightforward. If you click, you can do text. You can set all your text up here that you would want. I'm just going to assume that everybody knows how to use like Microsoft Word and has been doing text on computers for a long time, so not gonna go too in depth on that. Now, one important thing about text is that if you import this into, let me write an actual word here. Yeah, if you want to cut these letters out, right? It's just text, so doesn't really have that information, and it's still treating it like it's text that you can edit, just like you would in any other text editor. But we want to turn this into vectors that we can use to cut lines with. So what I can do is go to Arrange and Convert to Curves, or Control Q. And now it is no longer like, you know, quote unquote text, it is vectors. So I can remove the fill and give it an outline, and now we have actual vectors instead of like text that you can edit. Now that means you can't edit the text, like you cannot edit it at all as text anymore. So be sure that your text says what you want it to say, and is ready to go in terms of that before you convert it to curves for cutting. So when you do convert that to curves, it's all going to stay as one group. You might like to break the curve apart, which is so that like I can, you know, just extract this little part of the O or something. So yeah, if you right click, and this is true of squares and circles and whatnot, break curve apart. Now these are all individual. Yeah, that's text. So there we go. Now these measuring tools and all of these tools here are fills and stuff for graphic design, so I'm just gonna ignore those. We don't really need them for what we're doing. Some might like to use the dimension and the measuring tools and stuff. I don't do that, and a lot of people who do this kind of work don't either. If I want a square that are two, you know, that are a certain distance apart from each other, what I do is I grab myself a 2-point line and I say, you know, say that we'd like for these two little squares to be 1 inch apart from each other. I go draw a line, make it 1 inch, snap it to the node, snap this to the other node. I know that those are now 1 inch apart, and I just delete my line. That is very common in CAD design. That's like basically how people do it. Feel free to use the measuring tools, whatever. I find that way to be much, much faster though. All right, so where are we? Let's see. Let's talk about groups. Groups are very, very important. If we have two objects and we can group them so that they behave as one object. So now when I click this, I'm clicking both of those. And grouping happens in tiers. If I have this is a group, and then I draw another square and I group all three of these together, and the hotkey for grouping is Control-G. I strongly recommend learning the hotkeys. It will improve your workflow and make you so much faster. Just don't be going into all these menus all the time. Just learn the hotkeys. You'll thank me for that advice later. So now these are all one group, and the hotkey for ungroup is Control-U. So if I Control-U this, this is separate, but this is still a group. So it ungroups in tiers according to how you grouped it. Now I can ungroup that, and now this is no longer a group either. If you have stuff grouped, you can't use the shape tool, so you have to ungroup everything before you're able to use the shape tool again. Yeah, groups are very important. When you have a bunch of oddly shaped items and they are all kind of nested into a something that'll fit on your material, and you don't have stuff grouped and you're trying to move it around and you can't get in there to draw a square around it without grabbing a bunch of other stuff, it's really obnoxious. So just group everything, and when you need to edit it, ungroup it. Alright, yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about mirroring. That's also a very important thing. Let's get something that's actually going to look like something when we flip it. Alright, I select all these objects, flip horizontally, or mirror horizontally, and it just mirrors it horizontally, and flip vertically, mirror vertically, and it mirrors vertically. So pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, now over here we have our, color options, and if you have an item selected first and you click it regularly, left click it, it gives it a fill. Not something we're going to use very often, although I do have a very important use for it that I'll review a little bit later. But yeah, this gives it no fill at all. And yeah, so in most laser software, it does, regardless of whether it's RDWorks or the ULS interface or Trotec, you have different operations that you're going to want to do with different colored lines. I may want my black lines to cut all the way through, and I may want my red lines to just score a mark, or I may want things to happen in a particular order. So I might make my internal features of my design red and my external features black, and then when I select the order in which things are going to happen, I make red happen first, so that all my interior features are cut before the external cut. And the reason for that, the reason I do that, is because wood particularly, which is very commonly laser cut, is almost always warped. If you laser cut with any regularity, you will know that it is a constant struggle to battle against warped wood. Maybe I'll do another video on tips and tricks for that, but if you have some circles inside of a square and it cuts this, you have your wood weighed down with weights on it, or clamped down to your work board, your work table or whatever, and it cuts the exterior out. That piece can pop up and pop out of there and kind of like revert back to its warpedness. So it's really smart idea to cut the interior features first, because if this cuts the outer and it warps out of place, and you cut your red circle later, there's a strong possibility that your circle's going to be in the wrong place relative to your, to your external cut line. So just go, like I always cut interior lines first, and so for that reason I make my interior bolt holes, or, we cut out a million things, so whatever it is, just cut interior parts out first, or do your engraving first before you cut out the external shape. Alright, yeah, so forgive me, I'm not like a tutorial maker, so hopefully this isn't too freeform or hard to follow. Let's go into some of the more slightly advanced features. You know what, actually, let's talk about some other hotkeys, like Control D. Control D is Control Duplicate, or it's duplicate, and very, very useful. So what Control D does is if I select my object and I hit Control D, it will just create a new one. And you can, in your, your setup properties for how you set your file up, give it the offset that it has. Like how far it offsets it, or if it offsets it at all when you hit Control D. But the most useful thing about Control D is that it moves it a little bit, and then it does that again repeatedly. So it also takes, if I hit Control D and then I move this elsewhere, snap it to a different node on another part of your design, whatever, and I hit Control D again, it repeats exactly what I just did. So this is a great layout tool and stuff. You know, if I have a bunch of I don't know, cards, coasters, whatever, all the stuff we always laser cut, and I want to just lay them all out in here instead of in the laser software, and I want them all to be 1/8 of an inch apart, I draw 1/8 of an inch line. Oh, here we go. Here's, if you have lock ratios engaged, you can't change the dimension of lines. So now I have an 1/8 inch line, and so I select this object again, I move it, snap it to this node. Oops, I forgot to hit Control D. Oops. Okay, Control D, snap it to this one, and then as I go, hit Control D again, it just makes as many of those as I want. And then I delete my measurement line, and yeah, pretty handy, pretty handy. Another way to do that is to grab your object, move it, and then when you have it where you want it, right click, and it just creates a new one. And that sort of acts as it does the same thing as Control D, so once I've done that, if I hit Control D, it'll repeat that again. Yep, that's a very, very handy thing, is that right click option. Yeah, what other hotkeys do I use constantly? Those are the most important ones. Control D, and then obviously copy and paste is, Control C and Control V, just like every other software in the world. And then undo. Control X is undo. Control Z is redo. So I'm gonna, I move this, and I'm like, oops. Oh, I had that backwards. Control Z is undo. Control Z is undo. Yeah, so I don't want to actually do that. I hit Control Z, but then I decide, oh, I did actually want to do that. I hit Control. Man, I screwed that up. Control X is just like delete. Control Z, undo, and then Control Shift Z is like undo the undo. So I move this, I decide I don't like it, Control Z, but then I'm like, okay, maybe I did actually like that. Control Shift C redoes it. So yeah, that's pretty handy. Control A selects everything that you have in your entire design folder. Yeah, I'll go over hotkeys as I think of them as we go. So let's talk about some of the other important things that we have. Yeah, I'll just get rid of all my Dockers now so that I can go open them. Okay, so join curves is very important, particularly in the world of CNC router work, because if the router doesn't understand, it doesn't have a closed object, it has no way of understanding how to cut on the inside or the outside of a shape. So we have to, before we import our design into VCarve, Aspire, whatever CAM software we're using for the router, we need to have closed shapes, and that can be hard to maintain while you're in the zone vector designing, and so you're going to need join curves. It's the easiest way to deal with that. Yeah, so I've got two objects, right, and I have cut out the middle of them with my virtual segment delete, and now these are still two objects, but they've been kind of married together. If we load that into VCarve just as is, it's going to say this is not a closed object. I don't know how to deal with this. So we need it to be closed. Join curves, arrange, join curves, and that's going to open up a little Docker here, and it'll join. It'll like kind of extend. It'll extend lines if they're like kind of like a little bit apart. You don't want that. You want to go in and make sure all your nodes are snapped together usually. But yeah, it will make little jumps, and it'll jump as far as you tell it to. But if I hit apply, now this is one shape, one curve, and your router software will see it as such. So it can be tricky because oftentimes, especially in the heat of design, we get lines that are overlapping each other, excuse me, or that are not quite connected, and we hit join curves, apply, and it doesn't work, and we don't know why it didn't work. So we have to figure that out. And that's, that's the way I verify that is once I have a joined curve and it's one object, it becomes fillable. So this is like basically the only time I use the fill, except for when I'm doing more graphic designerly things. But if I can fill it, I know that it's suitable, and that the router software, the CAM software, will see it as a closed curve and know how to deal with it. So yeah, you'll wanna go ahead and just join your curves and then verify it by filling it. That's the easiest way. You can just make all of your objects and select them all, join all the curves, and then hit that fill button, and you'll see if they fill, and if they don't fill, you have to go back in and inspect the object for duplicated lines or not quite joined. Yeah. All right. So another good one that I use quite frequently is the contour. That's transformations. Oh no, I'm sorry. Effects, transform. Whoa, where'd it go? Contour. All right, that opened us up another Docker, and so we have to the center, apply a contour that fills the object, or inside contour or outside contour. So if I have inside contour selected, and I just want one instance of this to happen, and I want the inside, it's going to basically reproduce this shape, but inside of it, according to the dimension that we specify. So if I want this to be, let's see, this square that I have drawn is enormous, so I'm going to make that a more reasonable size. Let's just make it 24 inches. 24, lock ratio, 24. And I want to have a square that is inside of it by 1 inch. So I select it, I enter 1 inch. You can change the corner type here and apply, and it gives me a square that is 1 inch from all the parts of from the other square. This works for a lot of other crazy weird shapes too, so you can design all kinds of crazy stuff and then use that contour to enlarge it or make smaller or larger lines inside of it. Again, in order for the contour tool to understand that you want to do that when you have objects that you've drawn, you also need to have the curves joined so that it understands what to do. Now once you do that and you select it, it's kind of like married to the shape, the original shape, and sometimes we might want to go in there and edit it more specifically, or just move it off and use it elsewhere. We have to right click, break contour group apart, and now these are two separate entities instead of being married to each other. Alright, that's really the kind of important stuff. I wanted to keep us under 30 minutes. We got a couple more minutes, so we can talk about something that we will encounter pretty frequently, especially with CNC routing. I end up doing a lot of slot and key type of stuff, so I can fit it all together really perfectly and then glue it or screw it or nail it or however I'm going to join it. So yeah, specifically on the CNC router, what we're going to encounter is that we have our slot that we cut out, and then we have our tab that we're going to put into that slot. But because the bit is round, it won't fit in the slot because the corners are not perfectly round on the inside, or not 90 degrees on the inside. They're rounded by the radius of our bit. So yeah. We need to solve that, and what I do and what many other people do is what's called Dogbone. So I'll make kind of a mock part here. This is my base plate that I'm going to want to put a slot into. So we'll make the slot, and we're going to say we're using 1/2 inch material, 0.5 inch, and then we want our slot to be 5 inches long. Oh, oops! I need to unclick the ratio. 5 inches long. So now we have a slot that's 5 inches by 1/2 inch, and here's another useful thing while we're here. If I select these and I hit C, it centers them horizontally, and if I hit E, it centers them vertically. So pretty handy. I'll make this a little smaller. So there we go. There's like the part that has the slot in it, and then I'll just duplicate that, and if I start moving this and I hold control, it forces it to be on the same parallel as this. I'm not capable of going up or down. It's forced into being on that in line with it. So yeah, I'll bring it to the edge and let go, and then I'll get rid of my line through there, and then I'll join the curves, and I'll double check that it's one object. So yeah, on my actual part that I pull off the router, I'm gonna want this to slide into there. But what we'll discover is that when we cut it with the router has a round bit. It makes a curve right here. So these parts could never possibly be joined together correctly. You'd have to get in there with a jigsaw or whatever and make those perfect 90s. So what I do and a lot of other people do is what's called like dogboning. Now, like VCarve has an option to do this, a little bit easier inside of VCarve. But if you want to do it here, that's fine too. And it's, sometimes for some reasons it's a little bit better of an idea. So let's say, just for the sake of this tutorial, that I'm using an 1/8 inch bit. Here is, kind of like a representation of that bit. And so, you can see as it travels up, this is like what your radius is going to look like on your corner here. That's not exact. I'll just drag that a little further. Still not exact. There we go. So yeah, that's not what we want. But we also don't want, like some crazy looking corners. So we need half of this to be like dogboned. And what that is I take the quadrant node here and I attach it to the corner. And I also do that here. And then I grab these two and I snap them to the bottom of the object, and I'm grabbing it, dragging it, and then right clicking so I duplicate it. And then I just get rid of all of these lines in the middle, and now we have a dogbone slot. That means that this inner corner is actually capable of accepting a piece with 90-degree corners. So one thing to note, I did actually make this an 1/8 of an inch, which is 0.125. If you are, most CAM software, if you try to, I would make it like 0.126, like 1/1000th of an inch bigger, so that your CAM software doesn't give you hassle about whether or not the bit will fit. So we also have that same problem here where the radius will not give us something that can fit into the slot without sticking out, or that we have to go in and fix later. So we'll make a 0.126 circle and we'll snap it to that and then get rid of that. And now we have a part that can fit together perfectly on the CNC router. And then once again, we need to join all the curves, and we'll just double check. Good to go. All good to go. You could export a DXF of this and send it to your CNC router software, and it'll accept it great. Okay, I think that's where I'll stop this for now. I hope this has been helpful for some people. Go ahead and comment if you got better ideas. Like I said, I'm totally self-taught. I'm constantly learning new things, and I'm also open to being wrong about everything upon the receiving better information. So yeah, I hope you guys have a good day, and maybe this will help you to ask for people's files less on Facebook groups and instead be able to design your own things. So yeah, I hope everyone has a good day, and I'll see you next time.